The reserve list is quite often filled with cards that are straight up unplayable, which is no secret. Just take a look at Thunder Spirit, a card worth over $100. Many of these cards are expensive because they are incredibly rare cards, and the ones that are playable skyrocket in value because of increased demand and the same low supply. I mean, just look at what happened to Gaia's Cradle. So ever since I made my video on the reserve list, and I've gotten a few reserve list cards myself from random buys, I've been on a quest to find the best budget EDH cards on the reserve list. Hello everyone, just wanted to pop in real quick before the video got going, which doesn't make sense because the video is going right now, but you know what I mean. I am here to say that the card prices that I feature in this video are a little bit off, which I know is really confusing because I made the video, so I could have just changed the card prices, but in case you haven't noticed, I'm a slow worker at times. It took me like 33 days to upload another video, so I just wanted to get this video out there in the world because the reserve list prices right now are changing rapidly, so I wanted to update everyone on some really good reserve list cards that were under $2, which I think is affordable to almost everyone. So everything I say about the cards throughout the video is still true, just the prices are a little bit off, so take them with a bit of a grain of salt. If you want to check the prices, there is a comment that I will pin in the description below, so you can go down and you can see what the prices are at the time I release this. So thank you guys for watching, and let's get into the video. Also, if you haven't noticed yet, this is a pretty long video, so there are timestamps in the description for specific cards. To begin this fabulous list, I have a weird card by the name of Morinfen. This card on the surface seems terrible, which is because it is, but it being bad is just perfect for Blim comedic genius, which is what I thought at first, until I realized you can just not pay the upkeep cost. So that's not great. And where this is weirdly good is with Villa's Broker of Blood, unlike Blim, which I messed up, because it will draw quite a few cards. Every janky deck that wants to win with Axis of Mortality probably wants to consider this card as well, making this a classic example of a card that is so bad, it might be good, for just 46 cents. And Gallowbraid is the exact same effect, except no flying and one more toughness. This card is still only 56 cents. Next up is another mediocre card that was way too fun not to include, Gargantuan Gorilla. This card is arguably not good. Yes, you have to sacrifice a forest every turn just to keep it around, even though it could be argued that Gitrog Monster won't be mad about that, and Splendid Reclamation would love it. But this can essentially fight. Note that this does not count as fighting because if it has Infect, for example, it would deal its damage first and reduce the power of the other creature before it did damage. So all the decks that care about fighting probably don't want to play this. And would I want to play this in a deck? Probably not. Is it good enough to go in a deck? No. But do I feel an obligation to talk about a card called Gargantuan Gorilla? Absolutely. Only 48 cents. Next up is not a gorilla, unfortunately, but it is Lichenthrope. This is a truly wacky card, but it's sorta good with Apatra, whereas being dealt damage in the form of counters and then having to remove those counters may normally be a drawback. In this deck, it can be a way to move around counters, and the removal of a counter itself allows more space to make a counter every turn. Overall, I think this is a simple card that may not get main decked in Hapatra, but it could be interesting to try and is definitely playable with the correct deck. And it's a fun experiment for just 61 cents. Plus, there are some really weird builds this thing could slot into that care about obscure counters. Stacks is annoying to play against, I think we can all agree with that. This combo is probably not as effective as many others, and some may say not as good, but Floodwater Dam can in some extreme circumstances lock down all lands you don't control, and in most other circumstances lock down some. If you have this card in Seedborn Muse as well as a lot of mana, you could activate it every turn to tap down your opponent's lands in the upkeep and watch their mana disappear. and still be able to take your turn as normal. But Forsaken Monument, Basalt Monolith, and a slew of other mana producers as well as Unwinding Clock can get the job done too. Untap every turn and use your mana to lock down someone's lands. Be mean and throw in a Winter Orb, and then you can use your mana somewhere else. Put this card in Vorinclex and lose some friends. But this card still has the potential to be very powerful when everything lines up perfectly. So I'm not sure this is an always main deckable card, but for only 61 cents, I'll try it. Misfortune is not an amazing card in EDH, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is interesting. The variability makes it playable in some of the -1/-1 counter decks or +1/+1 counter decks. It may have synergy with Chandra's Incinerator, but it probably won't because I wouldn't allow my opponent that much value if I was playing that card. So where I can't point to a deck and say, this is where that fits, this is still a pretty unique card and only 70 cents. Sheltered Valley, in my opinion, may be the most underrated card on this list. This is just a strictly better Wastes, and this card is only played in 35 decks. The duplication problem just doesn't matter in Commander, and Wastes are played in 4,908 decks all across the format. So in literally any monocolored deck running this card, it seems like a no-brainer. Maybe it winds up just being a normal Wastes, which means you lost nothing from running it, or maybe it gains you a few life. If you play this card turn 1, you gain a total of 3 life, which is assuming you don't have any bounce lands, which is better than a Radiant Fountain, and definitely can be better if you get land stuck. But then again, being land stuck 1 life doesn't always matter. This is not an incredible card, but it has potential, and it definitely should slot into more than 35 Commander decks, when again, monocolored Commander decks don't really lose too much by running this. Which is why I dare say this should be an auto-include in every colorless Commander deck. 83 cents can get you a copy of this underrated gem. Hakim, Loreweaver, is one of those super janky commanders that seems sort of unique and fun. This commander has enchantment recursion. It can kill with commander damage, and it can play around with really unique cards like River Kelpie, all in blue. This card, again, isn't really that great, but it offers something unique, and I feel like that's worth recognizing too. At 96 cents, this can be a great budget brew. That rhymed. Next up, Anaba Ancestor wouldn't be the worst card I've ever played in a tribal deck. It can give some boosts, can help creatures survive in combat, and it can ultimately chump block pretty well. That doesn't seem too terrible for 94 cents. Given the lack of depth at 2 mana for Angry Cows, I could see myself playing this. Because this video is all about finding the playable cards on the reserve list, I want to mention the really weird, absurd combo that is Arcane Adaptation choosing a Freet or Djinn in a Zedru deck. Stay with me. Choose one of these types, give the adaptation to an opponent, and then play Suleiman's Legacy. Now, that opponent cannot play creatures. Or you could use Image Crafter with the Legacy to destroy a creature. Mistform Mutant does the same thing. But none of these compare to Standardize, which makes a weird combo 4-mana board wipe. So yes, I am stretching to make this card work, but I think it could see play in Zedru with the adaptation or Xenograft. This may be 99 cents, but it is in 0 decks on EDHrec.com, a feat that is strangely impressive, but that may not stand the test of time with some of the new changelings coming in call time. Because, if anything, this can be a really good changeling hate card. Moving on from cards where I have to stretch to make it worthwhile is Aku Djinn. It's definitely playable in Blim Comedic Genius. Another good example of a card that is so bad it's good. Your opponents will thank you for it as well, except for the one who has it. And by the way, this is the first card on the list worth over $1 at $1.54. Slightly up the price ladder at $1.85 is Commander Greven Il-Vec. That is at 6 mana 7/5 that causes you to sack a creature when it enters, meaning it could command a nice Aristocrats deck, albeit probably not the best commander for the deck. And this commander has Fear, 3 strikes and you're out. For 6 mana, this is no Lord of, that comes in a later video, Nicol-Bolas, but it is a cool commander because it makes itself mostly unblockable. The reserve list has plenty of, surprise, bad cards, but I think that's been established. Let's move on to a bit of better cards. But first, we need to talk about Ritual of Subdual. This card is mean. End of story. This may not be for everyone, but if we can still make green mana with a non-land source guaranteed, so in an Elf stack or Sidon Crowsand Protector, we can really take advantage of this card. We can still play stuff our opponents cannot, and our opponents may not be able to remove this card from the battlefield without a Scour of Existence. So this is expensive, but not in money at $1.14, but it might be able to be a win condition. Tolarian Serpent is one of the first cards on this list that is, in my opinion, genuinely good without having to work too hard. Any self-mill deck in blue probably wants to play this card. Sidisi Brood Tyrant is one that jumps to the front of my mind, and again, there has to be a weird bad gift deck that wants to mill someone out with this. But that's not where this will excel, so probably not a great way to judge it. I would, however, consider putting this in Muldrotha the Gravetide. There are cheaper mill options, but this is really effective. 2 turns with this thing out in Muldrotha, and you've effectively drawn 14 cards. You can pick this up for $1.39. Next up on the list is Willow Priestess, a good include for any fairy tribal decks that care to include green. But it makes this list because it is great with changelings, and a good old arcane adaptation. The changeling deck seems like it's getting more love with every set, so for $1.78, this is a very interesting effect. Here we have a card I have no problem running with the partner tandem Okon and Zinder Split. That card is Winter Sky. Free Corn Flip for 1 mana? Yes please. It is either a win and we get all the advantages the deck has to offer, like doubling power and toughness and drawing a card, or we can do 1 damage to everything, which might be able to take care of all the plants that an Avenger of Zendikar makes. For 1 mana, that extra flip will only put you back $1.51. The last card on this list, I will admit, is pretty wacky, but at land, it can come out of nowhere and save you from losing the game, which is pretty effective and something we've seen on Glacial Chasm. The card is Halls of Mist. At $1.88, it's the last card on the list, but definitely not the worst. This card can just prevent attacks outright. That's pretty darn good. Simple, but good. It can save your life. So in conclusion, I hope this video helped you discover some solid budget underrated cards for $2, these that happen to be on the reserve list. There's plenty of weird cards on this list, so what is your favorite card? Let me know in the subscribe button below. Don't forget to smash that comment and like this video so you can be notified when I post a video. Yes, you heard that right. If you want to buy your favorite card or your least favorite, I'm not picky, then there is no better place to do so than tcgplayer.com. On this site, when you purchase, you can, for no extra cost, use my TCG Player affiliate link to have a portion go to supporting the channel. Thank you so much for doing that if you decide to. Watch you so much for thanking, and great have day.